Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 1 about theories of government. It is Lesson 7 about rule of a few. In this lesson, you'll learn about the positive features and negative features of rule of a few, about Aristotle's definition of aristocracy, about his definition of oligarchy, and about examples of oligarchs. In previous lessons, we learned that the problems of living without government would naturally lead us to want a government to provide us with security for our lives, our liberty, and our property. But having decided that we want a government, we must next decide what form of government will be best. We then turn to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle for guidance about the possible forms that a government might take. As represented in the rows of this chart, Aristotle decided that we can arrange the possible forms of government into three general categories. A government might consist of a single person who rules over everyone else, or a government might be composed of a small number of persons who share power over the people, or the people might make up the government themselves. Then, as represented in the columns of this chart, Aristotle further divided these categories according to the purposes that they might serve. He said that there are two general purposes that rulers might pursue. Some rulers, whether they be one, few, or many, may use their power to try to benefit the entire community over which they rule. Other rulers, whether they be one, few, or many, may use their powers to benefit themselves. In our last lesson, we learned that rule by a single person who seeks to serve the needs of the community was called monarchia by Aristotle. That word has evolved into the term monarchy that we use today. We also learned that a single ruler who seeks to serve just his own desires was called tyrannus by Aristotle. That word has evolved into the term tyranny that we use today. In this lesson, we'll examine the possible outcomes of rule by a few people. In our next lesson, we will consider rule of the many. When we think of rule by a few people, a council or a congress may come to mind. Is this rule by a few people a good idea or a bad idea? Rule by a small group of people can have some positive features. Allowing multiple people, who may have different backgrounds, values, and beliefs, to participate in governing can lead to diverse ideas being proposed as solutions to problems. With more ideas being discussed by those who rule, there is a greater chance of finding the best solution. In addition, with people holding different views sharing power, bad and dangerous ideas favored by some leaders can be stopped by other leaders who disagree with them. But rule by a small group of people can also have some negative features. Those few leaders are likely to come from a single, elite class in society, with all leaders sharing the biases and desires of that class. This will mean that their ideas won't be diverse at all. Also, because these few leaders will likely share the same values rather than checking each other's power, they are likely to conspire together to increase the power of their class, or of themselves as a group. And there's an additional possible problem. With these few governing positions being elite and powerful, they are likely to attract leaders who will be power hungry. They can end up fighting over the power they possess, with the most ruthless seizing power from the others, until there is only one of them left in charge, and that one would be a tyrant. Whether rule by a few people is more effective than destructive may be a function of the attitude of those few people. In other words, it may depend on what they want to accomplish. Are these few rulers using their great power to serve the people over which they rule? Or are these rulers using their power to serve their own selfish desires? Aristotle recognized these possibilities and provided us with labels to describe them. A small group of rulers who seek to serve the needs of the community were called aristocratia by Aristotle. The word means that the best hold power. The word has evolved into the term aristocracy that we use today. Aristotle's aristocracy uses their power for the benefit of the people in their dominion. This may be a bit confusing because the meaning of aristocracy has changed in modern times. Of course, those who are among the elites who rule society would want to be thought of positively, like Aristotle's selfless rulers. So they took to calling themselves aristocrats, whether they deserved the complimentary label or not. Eventually, it came to be associated with anyone from an elite class, and these people are often viewed negatively by the masses. When most people use the term aristocrat today, they are simply describing people who they think of as rich snobs. But rich snobs might be better described by Aristotle's other term for rule of a few. A small group of rulers who seek to serve just their own desires were called oligarchia by Aristotle. The word means that the few command. That word has evolved into the term oligarchy that we use today. Aristotle's oligarchy used their power for their own selfish benefit, not to serve the common people. Today, the term oligarchy is most commonly used to refer to a small number of incredibly wealthy and powerful Russians. During the decades when Russia was part of the communist nation called the Soviet Union, the country's resources and businesses were owned by the government. When the government collapsed, ownership of those properties was up for grabs, and they were seized by a few well-connected and ambitious individuals. As a result, they became among the wealthiest people on the planet. Together, they assert significant influence over the governing of Russia today. That completes this lesson. Now let's review what we have learned. What is a positive feature of rule by a small group of people? Is it the most efficient form of government? May it provide a way to check power? Does it create a unity of ideas? Or does it ensure that public opinion is respected? Having more than one person sharing power may provide checks on power. What is a negative feature of rule by a small group of people? Does it promote diversity of ideas? Will the rulers conspire together? Does it produce complicated laws? Or is it impossible to form a consensus among the rulers? Having only a small group of people in power allows them to conspire together to serve their own ends. Who are Aristotle's aristocracy? Are they all ruling elites? Or are they self-serving ruling elites? Or are they public-serving ruling elites? Or are they just rich snobs? Aristotle's aristocracy was made up of public-serving ruling elites. Who are Aristotle's oligarchy? Are they all ruling elites? Or are they self-serving ruling elites? Or are they public-serving ruling elites? Or are they just rich snobs? Aristotle's oligarchy was made up of self-serving ruling elites. Who is commonly referred to as an example of oligarchs today? Are they Japanese industrialists? Or are they the British Parliament? Or are they pop entertainment stars? Or are they Russian billionaires? Russian billionaires are often called oligarchs today. That completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 1. It'll be Lesson 8 about the rule of the many.